Hello and welcome to this virtual roundtable discussion where we'll be attempting nothing less than revolutionising retail and asking what's in store. This video, sponsored by Cegid, will form the basis of an article in the Future of Retail supplement published in the Sunday Times. I'm your host, Morag Cuddiford-Jones, and I'm delighted to be joined by leaders from four of the most influential retailers and retail experts. They are Beth Butterwick, CEO of Jigsaw, Leanne Cahill, CEO of Bravissimo, Chris Rigg, Retail Director of Ellis Brigham, and Alan Holcroft, Country Manager at Cegid. And let's kick this straight off. It feels as though the retail experience is evolving right in front of our eyes, and change is happening so quickly. With digital and online grabbing so many column inches, my first question is quite simply, what's a store for?
I think more than ever, customers are expecting to know and really deeply understand the brands that they're considering to shop with, be aligned to their values and be listened to and understood and have a really personalised kind of offer be brought to them, so they can be navigated through choice and get recommendations that are really individual. And I think there's lots of ways retailers can respond to that, but clearly stores, physical environments are really uniquely placed, I think, to provide all of these things. So I think for a lot of brands now, stores are there to give a really holistic, full experience of a brand, where you can literally step in and immerse yourself in a brand and see everything and experience everything that they've got to offer.
Fantastic. Stepping into the brand sounds like a really interesting concept. I mean, Chris, do you have any views of what it means to step into that brand physically?
I'd absolutely agree with what Leanne says. I think from a branded retailer point of view, a consumer wants to engage with that brand, and doing that in a physical environment where they can touch and feel products and crucially speak to people is really, really key. I think we also have to look at two kind of separate customer journeys. There's the experiential shopper who wants the branding experience, is going out there for an activity, but there's also a need for functional retail as well. And I think we have to be careful of not forgetting that actually there's a lot of people who just want to go into a store and access the products they want as quickly as possible and get home. So much is said about experiential retail and theatre within retail. I think that's absolutely key, particularly from a branded point of view, but I definitely think that people still just want to walk into a shop and purchase in the old traditional way and go away again.
Fantastic. And how do we make sure that functional environment is still working optimally? Because of course our expectations have changed with what digital's been able to do for us.
It comes down to good customer service. It comes down to giving a customer choice. Now, choice used to be maybe different colors or different options within a store, but choice is now about convenience. Is when can I access product? How can I get it? And that is it click and collect? Is it sold directly from a store and then sent to your home address? All those things give customers choice, or just going online and buying it. And without kind of moving into omnichannel, now a customer wants that functional experience to happen fast and smoothly. And that's where tech and the store associates come really important to make sure that journey worked well.
Fantastic. Beth, you're nodding along there.
Yes, no, I agree with that. And I think, the word omnichannel is almost omnichannel plus now, because it's all about how it really does join up completely if you're not a pure play. And I'm thinking about some of the devices and techniques that I've used in previous businesses, where tablets that can help you look up stock, find it locally, build outfits for a customer, send the outfit ideas home, give them other solutions and ideas, talk to them about how influencers and maybe some of the journalists have showcased your product. So there are many more things that the role of stores can do. And certainly in the business I'm in now, Jigsaw, we did some research recently, and our stores are very much part of a local community. So our store colleagues will build relationships with other shopkeepers, local councils, do fashion shows. It's more than just a store showcasing your product. It's a purpose in that community, whether it's a local high street or a sort of regional centre. Really, really important.
Fantastic. I want to come back to that idea of community in a minute, but I'd just like to hand over to Alan briefly, talking about this, the functional and the omni-channel. It's great to have all these bells and whistles and the tablets in store and the recommendations, etc. But how we've seen so much acceleration of digitization, and for retailers, many of them shoved into a more digital environment by the pandemic. How easy is it for us to click our fingers and say, no, it's all tied up, it's all digitized, all that data is flowing in the right place?
Well, I think it'd be fair to say it's a challenge for everyone. I think for me, the savvy retailers that I've come across have been adopted a more strategy of purposeful innovation. If we look at some things like, for example, magic mirrors, for example, of course, I think there's a place for them. But I think every retailer starts, is this the right strategy for me? There's so many priorities, different priorities that retailers are facing when it comes to specifically to technology. And for me, it's about finding the right balance that meets your brand aspirations. So whether it's investing in different technology to enable omni-channel flows, or is it around providing clienteling type data to your store teams? Those are the elements that people need to kind of be looking at to see, is it relevant for my brand and how best to implement it?
I think that's right about purposeful, because customers aren't thinking of themselves as online customers or store customers. They think of themselves as customers of a brand, and they don't want to be bothered about how we're, kind of sewing everything together in the background. They just want to shop with us and experience what we've got to offer, however they want to on that day, whatever works for them. So if we start from that perspective, then we do need solutions that just help that happen very, very naturally from a customer's perspective. So, we need, when a customer chooses to step into one of our stores, we want the team in store to be able to see the last thing that customer has purchased with us, even if that was online, and, to see their history and their size, and be able to join that up with what the customer's actually telling them now today, and give a much fuller experience that's based on all of that information.
I fully support that, Leanne. I think humans can interact and understand a customer's needs state, whether it's help with an outfit, they really don't know what they want, whether it's a quick solution as to I know what I want, or something else which machines can't do. And that's why, a combination of fantastic technology and the beauty of humans, I think, is probably the best experience from a brand point of view you can give a customer.
I'd absolutely agree with what both of you said. And I think that people piece is so important. And it's something that we all need to, in retail, make sure that we're valuing those people and we're building them as professionals within retail, because they do a point of difference that we can't currently do with tech. And I say currently because none of us can necessarily predict the future. But using technology in a store should be about supporting the customer, because the customer's never come in and said, I need an omni-channel experience. They've come in and said, how can I get my product as easy as possible? So we use a combination of technology with experience to give that value to the customer. And so one thing we're looking at Ellis Brigham is 3D footwear scanning, partly because we want people to get a good service within a store, but not to take away from our people, because we've got people with 20, 30 years worth of knowledge in their heads of doing this, and we don't want tech to replace that, but we want it to enable that customer to have almost a digital footprint of literally their footprint, which they can then use online to actually access products. And that, I think, where omni-channel and in-store service will develop is around the fitting process. And if we can digitize what happens with fitting, what a great person in the Jigsaw or Bravissimo might do by looking at someone, and then we can actually apply that to an online environment, we can be a real game changer in terms of linking that together.
Yeah, I totally support that. I mean, fit, certainly for a fashion business and a lingerie business as well, is absolutely critical. And let's not forget that returns and the cycle of returns, whether it's carbon footprint or cost for business, have a massive impact. So I think there's a lot around how we can find customers right size first. has both, you know, sort of customer satisfaction, brand halo, but also is really helping to sort of keep the costs and the carbon footprint down of businesses. So important.
Leanne, you were about to join in there. I mean, I know from Bravissimo's perspective, fit is everything in Bravissimo.
It is a lot of what we need to do right. Absolutely. I mean, for us, it's been really interesting to see, you know, when stores had to close, and we had to do things in a different way. We didn't actually do it without the stores. So we turned to virtual fitting and booking appointments with customers in their own home. But it was the store teams and the store environments that we used for that. And that's absolutely key. And actually one of the things that we're now battling with a little bit is trying to balance still being able to offer that whilst a store is open. So you have a physical experience going on in person in the store, but also you're giving virtual experiences to people at home and kind of having that all work in the same space, because we need to do that. And it's that, you know, Chris, you were saying about, you know, we want to keep our people and our customers want us to keep our people and to have them and their kind of knowledge and the advice they can give as part of this customer experience. And this is the way we can use our shops much more flexibly across our channels, to leverage the technology that we do have now.
I agree with that. It's amazing in the pandemic, isn't it, how creative we got. We also had our store staff advising customers online. There is actually an app you can get whereby when you're online shopping, rather than talking to a chat robot, you can actually dial into a sales assistant that's perhaps not serving someone at the time. Amazing what you can do. And then you get the full brand experience around what it looks like as well as the fit. But we used our stores as dark stores as well. It was going to be too cost ineffective to remove all our stock, not knowing how long stores were going to be open for. So we just had people deployed in closed stores fulfilling from a website, and it was very, very effective.
Yeah, we did exactly the same. And I think the challenge going forward will be what a store associate does. The old days of working on the shop floor and purely sales or replenishment of stock, it becomes much more complicated. There's video conferencing going on, there's phone calls with people, there's connections across multiple different devices. So the challenge is from a brand point of view is around the learning development and bringing people into the business that can support that journey.
I mean, Alan, if we were talking about how we talked about how we can use technology to support the customers, how can we then use technology to support those store staff? They're clearly being asked to do a lot more. I mean, their transactional role isn't there anymore. Digital does that.
Absolutely. This is the one great thing with working with so many retailers. We get to see so many different ways of operating and how retailers kind of face different challenges. And it's absolutely true. The role of the in-store team goes without saying. It's completely changed. They have to be brand ambassadors. They're now responsible for logistics. We expected them to be experts on sustainability and provenance, dealing with supply chain issues, et cetera, et cetera. And yet at the same time, they're still being measured on, in some cases, on traditional KPIs. So for me, that the technology is a really useful tool to complement that kind of change in role. And of course, we also want them to be more productive at the same time, right? I can't speak for you all, but maybe some of my other customers are, particularly based here in the UK, are facing challenges with recruiting staff in store and maybe the right level of staff. So they're kind of leaning on us and say, how can I make my teams more productive in store? And if there's one thing that I've learned is you can't just dump a whole bunch of different technology applications and platforms at your store teams and say, right, get on with the job. We actually have to make it a lot more simple and a lot more intuitive. And that really is maybe a challenge for software vendors like my own company, but also for retailers in general.
I think it's a very interesting point, coming back to that whole idea of community. So we're thinking about the role of in-store, what's a store for, the role of in-store associates, and you've just been talking there about productivity. How do I make my staff more productive? But what does productivity mean? If productivity is staff engaging with the community and creating experiential events where not a stitch is sold, not a cash till rings, what does productivity mean when it comes to the in-store environment?
I think that's a really good question. I think we have to look at different ways of measuring people within stores. We've changed our whole incentivization from store staff away from being about individuals and sales, and making it about the overall kind of company sales, linking with omnichannel. I currently don't think we have the answer for that, of how we look at productivity, and I think it's a really hard one to quantify. Those personal touch points that you might be running a talk in the evening or a class or something like that, you can't quantify that immediately, but you then look at the entire estate you run. I think you have to then look at the halo effect of the stores and what that does for online, and measuring that halo effect of a store is probably the most important thing we can do in planning to build, but also to look at our current estate and go, does it work? So can you look at the productivity of an individual? Pretty hard to do that without individual kind of line management, but can you see the success of a store from an online growth in that local area? I think that's where you can really start to measure that.
Leanne, you were ready to jump in and add, I think.
Well, we were talking earlier about values and purpose, and that customers want that from brands now. And when we can connect with customers on a kind of deeper level, not just transactional, I think that's when we really get, that's what engenders true loyalty, when customers have really engaged with us. And that's the kind of experiences we're talking about kind of delivering in our shops now. So really the measure of whether we're doing a good job and whether that team member in a store is spending their time in the right way and being effective is really, are we having those experiences? So we tend to use customer feedback, and the type of customer feedback that's talking about how they've felt, that to us, it's a longer burn, it's a much longer term measure, but we know that those customers that contact us and say they left us feeling amazing and feeling confident and feeling like they've found somewhere where they belong, they are the customers that will be doing all of our marketing for us, telling people about their experience, and they will be back. So that, if that's ultimately our measure, it kind of refocuses our attention on, not so much the traditional measures, they're important, but more the ones that are going to build that long-term relationship.
And Beth, you were talking about a little bit about community there, and about reaching out into the broader community, not just, talking about within the store and the great things that people can do to engage with customers. How does that sort of contribute to the whole successful jigsaw puzzle? Sorry, I had to say it.
I think actually, I mean, we're also looking at, in terms of how you measure the whole digital journey and postcodes and customer satisfaction. At the end of the day, stores still have to contribute, don't they? Very few businesses can have brand flagships that don't pay their way. But again, it's really interesting. I look at some of our best stores or our smallest stores, highest densities. Ilkley is a really good one. It's only about 850 square feet, but it has the highest densities, and that store manager is so engaged with the local community. She's working with local council to make sure that we have adverts, fashion shows. She takes an interest in going to speak to all the local shopkeepers. They compare notes. Yeah, I think it shines through. I think store contribution and the power of your brand actually does come through your people and your managers and how innovative they are. So she's building, it's not even a big community, but people like that build great relationships with their communities and go above and beyond. And I think it shines through in your sales, because your customers come back and they spend.
There's different aspects of community as well. So that's like the local community that we're operating in. There's also the community of customers that come in, because that's, the real life version of that community that we all build on social channels. And I love to see when you go into some stores, you really get a sense that everyone's having a great time, and kind of you get customers interacting with each other. you know, yes, coming in with friends or family, but actually talking to other customers they've just met in the fitting area. And it's that sense of building a community that's important as well about a shop, because the digital community is fantastic, but it just isn't tangible. It hasn't got quite that authenticity that you have when you feel like you've got something in common with the people that you're spending some time with.
Fantastic. I just want to move just what I've been hearing a lot about is, you know, the engagement with a brand and building a lot of that great feeling and advocacy and engagement with stores and with people. Is there a difference between the engagement with a pure branded store like Bravissimo or a multi-brand retailer, like from direct consumer brands picking up retail environments, or from multi-brand retailers? Is there a difference in generating the engagement? Because of course, selling multiple brands, you're selling multiple mini brand engagements, aren't you? It's like, you know, maybe I'm a massive fan of Ralph Lauren, but not a massive fan of Debenhams when I go in to buy it. The experiences can be quite discordant sometimes. How do you have any experience or thoughts on the difference between the engagement of someone who's got a relationship with the brand you're selling and a relationship with the retailer brand?
I think the best department stores, if you use that example, and we'll take Selfridges as an incredible showcase. If you actually forget which brands they sell, you go in there for the experience. You go in there to be shaken up, surprised. It's an incubator of new brands, but then you've got the consistent brands that you go to as well. So I think if you're talking about the multi-brand idea, it's all about what that multi-brand stands for, and then the offer below that are the brands, the adjacencies that sit together. And I think then you build the right community and the right, you know, your lifetime value of customers is so important. We all talk about it, but then you build lifetime rather than sort of, you know, people that goes in, buy that brand, disengage, goes out again. And that's actually, when we think about department stores that have fallen by the wayside, that's probably what they didn't do. I don't think it's sustainable to have a brand that you go there where you don't actually believe in the overall purpose of that parent brand.
I think Beth summed it up brilliantly there. And as a multi-brand retailer, this is one of our biggest challenges. Lots of our brands we stock are going direct to consumer with stores and online sales. And we have to look at that as a challenge, but also it's an opportunity as well. We then position ourselves as our own brand in the marketplace and have our own values and our own identity. And we consider ourselves as the kind of experts within our areas. And I think customers come for that, and they come for the broader knowledge and expertise and fitting services that our stores provide. And then the brands we select to go in align with that, and they are premium brands, they're top performance brands, they have the right sustainable and ethics behind them, and that as well as develops their brands, but also actually further supports our brand growth as well. We then longer term have to look at, why does a brand want to be in our stores? And we have to actually give a brand a reason to be there and not just go direct to consumer. And I think currently there is some value in being in a multi-brand store to some of them, but I think your case in Debenhams, maybe they lost some of that focus and they didn't build their brand enough, and so there was no value to those brands being in there. So it's a challenge going forward, and I think maybe the model between traditional buying and selling between brands and multi-brand retailers may change, and actually there'll be more of a contribution from brands to want to be in a multi-brand environment where they add value to that brand as well to the consumer.
And I think, Chris, just picking on what you were saying, because I totally agree, presumably the best value customers are the customers that shop across multiple brands that you sell rather than destination for one brand. So actually the adjacencies and the values and the purposes of all those multi-brands that sit together is key, isn't it, to what you stand for and represent?
Absolutely. There are very few brands we do that can kit someone out for an expedition or an activity entirely from head to toe. So we have to bring different brands together, and that's where our role is, to bring the best brands that do the best products to give you that overall kind of service.
And in Bravissimo, actually, we have our own brand product, but we sell 25 brands alongside. So we are multi-branded, and I think where fit and support and all of that is such an important element of what we do, and the experience that comes first. And it's interesting, we have customers that shop with us for years and they may buy a brand from us like Fantasy or Panache, and they call it a Bravissimo bra. And that for me is exactly what you were just describing, Beth. It's because that's come first, and the experience that they had on the day is what they remember, and that's where their loyalty is. And the branded product is there it's a really big part of that equation, but it's almost supporting what we're offering rather than being the end point in itself.
I mean, if I go back to Selfridges example, you know, I shop the clothes there, I go to the restaurants there, I love the beauty hall, I sometimes buy my food there. I might be anchored as a clothing fashion person, but they've caught me on the other the other things that they provide. I'm absolutely, it's the consistent experience across the different product carriers that works so well, isn't it?
Fantastic. I mean, when we're talking about, I want to move on a little bit to the whole omnichannel experience and the blending of on and offline when it comes to retail. But just talking about how, I don't want to describe human beings in this way, but in store, it sounds like the in-store stuff, particularly when it comes to multi-brand, are like recommendation engines, you know, and that means they have to have a vast amount of information. I mean, Alan, in terms of hooking people up with this sort of information, how does digitization in store help those human recommendation engines function?
This is a big topic. But maybe we can kind of break it down into a few kind of components. I guess one of the first things that can maybe lead to an inconsistent experience in store is lack of product knowledge. Now I'm sure all your teams are in your respective stores are all experts, and it sounds from what I'm hearing today that it's great to see the passion and the knowledge that they bring to that. But I think where we are seeing some clever customers that tackle these things around the areas of product cataloging. So delivering key information about the product that you are selling in store. And I'm not just talking about maybe fit or color or size or stock availability, but maybe more around the provenance, the sustainability topic. And that, of course, in itself also then blends its way nice and neatly into the omni-channel flow, where you can then order in store to have an item fulfilled from your DC to the customer's home address. So a classic endless aisle order. And then I think the other thing is everyone loves to be consumers love to be recognized when they go into a store and have an experience. And I think that's when you talk about experiential retail, that's one of the big plus points. Am I recognized as an individual by myself? And I almost hate to say this, and I almost wasn't going to say it, but I will say the best experience that I have in retail is my local golf club, because those guys know me by my first name. They know exactly what my interests are. They are super informative when it comes to products, and they're obviously multi-brand. They're a multi-brand retailer. They do it exceptionally well, and technology for them has been a real enabler in this case. But equally, we have many customers out there doing some really wonderful things around clienteling, around product cataloging in store. And then, of course, those are the two corner fundamentals to really open up your omni-channel journeys or your omni-channel experiences.
Fantastic. It brings to mind a conversation I recently had with someone in charge of omnichannel at a very, 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 very big grocer store that we all know and love. And he was saying that if you think back, what our next future trend might be is going back to the 1900s, where the local butcher, baker and candlestick maker knew Mrs. Jones' name, and they knew that you were having a party on a Friday, so they put aside some extra candles and maybe a few extra cakes. And if you couldn't get to the store, then they'd drop it in at your house when the butcher's boy was making the journey. And he said, of course, nowadays you'd call it business analytics, click and collect and personalization, wouldn't you? So in terms of bringing that omni-channel experience and engaging customers, we haven't talked a great deal about some of the more functional elements. We touched on functional retail, but the functional elements that are now making retail a real full service experience. And I mean, Chris, I was wondering if you wanted to talk to us a little bit about, you know, how services such as, you know, click and collect and in-store pickup, etc., are really enhancing the store experience, or perhaps that you know, retailers might be struggling with this. It's not something they necessarily had to deal with in the past.
I think the clever trick as a retailer is making it look really smooth and easy, and for the customer. And quite often behind the scenes, there's a lot more work going on, or there's a lot more pain around technology and logistics to make it work. It's almost become a necessity now, where it was, oh, do you go to a retailer because they offer a click and collect service? If you don't now, you're probably pretty limited. And we're seeing that. We're seeing big uplift in click and collect. We're seeing also big uplift in what we call store to door, where we make a sale from a store, which is a product we don't have in that store, or maybe from an extended range. And that's probably where I see the bigger growth coming forward. We talk a lot about needing more experiences within stores. Maybe it's cafes, maybe it's areas for talks and lecture theatres. That means you can't have as much product in the store. You can't have that range, that depth that you would normally have. So where you can access an online inventory is probably going to be the biggest growth in omnichannel coming forward. But it's certainly been a challenge setting it up. But the more we do it, the more people interact with it. And we see huge figures in click and collect coming into our stores, and it's growing around our kind of fulfillment from store as well.
I think Chris raises a really good point about that. We've very much spoken about the external experience. And if we're thinking about businesses that are omnichannel, I think one of the bits that goes behind the scenes is how can we make everything as seamlessly as possible? So we have systems that talk to each other. So product information, stock location, customers being able to sort of have it sent to where they want, invoice matching, PIN with suppliers. I mean, all those things in many traditional businesses are multiple systems that are all sort of added on together. And I think going forward, you know, it's going to be critical for the providing the best customer experience and efficient service and bringing brands to life to find, you know, systems where all of this comes together very easily. So these amazing people that work in shops we're talking about that now have to upskill to be everything from clienteling through to sort of, you know, click and collect. We make their life as easy as possible for them. And I think that's probably the bit that we're all sort of grappling a bit with, as in what next? How do we do it efficiently?
And I think what that will end up being is probably on individuals' own personal phones, because I think that's probably the best way to do it. And we've, the last 5 years, we've introduced workforce management apps. We've got e-learning apps on people's phones as well. And you get to the point of it's just killing people off. I'm still waiting for someone to bring it all together in one place that works and talks to each other. That would be the kind of ideal nirvana for us, that we can actually see a simple solution, because we have to be in danger of loading more and more onto retail staff who, not everyone goes into retail as a career and probably aren't looking at it for a long term always. How do we give them the skills to actually enable that?
I actually think it makes it a far more interesting career in retail, don't you? I think we're underselling ourselves by not talking about all these amazing things that you know, a career in retail will enable you to learn and do. And I think that's, you know, we're certainly, with the whole job market at the moment, it's quite competitive and challenging. We're certainly thinking about how we talk about a role in store and what it actually means, and the breadth of skills.
Yeah, huge.
the fundamental skills you get in retail of communication and sales and talking to people are just so important for people. And I think everybody should go and spend some time working in stores, just from a personal experience of how to interact with people. But you're completely right. As an entire industry, we need to look at the value of our people and actually start positioning it, as other countries do around the world, as a good career and something to get into.
And Leanne, how was it? I mean, obviously you mentioned about the transition during the pandemic to the fact that it was store staff and store environments who were doing this virtual measuring. I don't know how in-depth and complex that technology was for you, but how do you find, trying to help in-store staff digitize, whether it's to support an omnichannel online experience or just to keep up with innovations?
It's, I think, really keeping it as simple as possible. And, we've talked about the breadth of what we're expecting from our teams, but it's trying to kind of play to their strengths and think about their experience and what they love to do. So within our teams, we've got, I mean, I'm sure we all do have some very young and tech savvy people working in our shops who, are often the ones introducing new trends on social channels to us and making suggestions and actually giving them a bit of control and making sure they've got the roots and the ability to raise ideas and make suggestions. We're trying out TikTok at the moment, and it's not being controlled much by our marketing team. It's the store teams that are off doing their own thing, which is a great example. But things like all the systems we're talking about and click and collect, it's I'm quite passionate about keeping things simple. And I know that, especially in a business the size of Bravissimo, bringing complexity is often not good news. So we're trying to do a lot of things now. So keeping everything as light as it possibly can be, and just really focusing on how do we help people spend most of their time doing the things that they're really valuable and enjoy doing. And therefore lighten the load as much as we can in the background. But it's certainly, there's certainly no quick, easy answer to all of that.
And Alan, one interesting perspective, I imagine, from technology, having talked about MarTech for all sorts of different reasons. Not only do you have people on the front line trying to use handhelds and trying to offer new innovative experiences, but you have, here we have 3 pretty major stores represented with a number of outlets, and you have whatever size IT team or procurement team having to then feed things out to the new organization. And also you have finite amount of IT people, finite data scientists to deal with things that ingest a ton of data. How are technologists able to not just simplify for front store staff, but to get as many people in the organization to all pull together from a tech perspective? What can be done there, and is it happening fast enough?
Well, personally, I don't think it's happening fast enough, but there's a good reason for that. It's clear a lot of retailers out there are facing challenges with legacy systems, and as Beth mentioned earlier, trying to get them all talk together is not sometimes as easy as you would hope. And then we have the pressures of finite IT teams, limited resource, time pressures, all of those things, and maybe constantly changing priorities within a business that then change direction. I think probably the first thing for me that we have seen, and I've experienced this personally firsthand in the last couple of years, is the kind of the advent or the rise to the fall of cloud computing. So moving your infrastructure into a cloud environment, that's really allowed our customers to accelerate with kind of new initiatives. Previously, and I don't want to get kind of too technical here, they were maybe hosting their own infrastructure and their own servers on site, and just the pace of change wasn't quite there. I'll give you a great example, and this happened during the first lockdown last year. One of my customers, a luxury brand, who are notoriously slow at implementing things because they're a luxury brand and they want to make sure that the quality of the customer experience is really consistent at all steps, came to me and said, we are reopening our retail stores in 2 weeks' time, and we feel that we need to have mobile POS solution available to help with certain elements around maybe social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. And they were able to implement a mobile solution in that and be ready for the store reopening side of things. And I think that was just a natural result of cloud computing, being able to kind of leverage that. So that would be for me a canny move. The other thing that we've noticed about, and this advantage of being a technology vendor where we have access to, on our cloud platform, we have more than 500 or 600 customers. We're able to analyze data at a collective scale. So, for example, we've seen the increase of omni-channel transactions generated on our platform quadruple over the last 6 months. Right. So this means to me the same that is indicative of that a lot of retailers are facing the same challenges. Not everyone, everyone's in the same boat. It's just about the pace of change. But really now we're starting to see the rise quickly of these new experiences and journeys that they've been able to enable kind of come to the fore. And that's the really exciting bit for me to see this starting to take place now.
Fantastic. I mean, one of the things that obviously technology is enabling us to do, and omnichannel's enabling us to do, is to expand. I mean, pre-digitization, there were a finite number of buildings into which you could put your stock or could afford to put your stock. Now it seems like the world's your oyster. And as I understand it, there have been some unintended consequences, I think, of digitization and digital reach during the pandemic. I mean, how has that impacted your businesses and suddenly realized, actually, there's a whole market out there, whether domestic, international, new segments? What sort of experiences have you had there?
Well, from Bravissimo's perspective, so when we went into delivering virtual fittings from our shops around the UK, obviously we were doing that because we were desperate to keep in touch with our customers. They were all turning to, can you remember Joe Wicks? They were all turning to exercise and being comfy at home, and obviously we could help them and needed to do that, to keep the business going. And suddenly the customers that were booking appointments were in Australia and across Europe. And in the first weeks, we found ourselves giving virtual fittings to actually women on all continents around the world, which is incredible because we've got 26 stores in the UK. We have 1 store in the US. And that was, pretty much where we thought our reach was in terms of our store teams, certainly. And for those customers internationally to be able to access and see our store environment actually, and benefit from our shops from all over the world was a real revelation for us. We just hadn't even considered it.
I'd like to add something quickly before we move on, which is we've spoken very much about customers today, rather than business models. But the one thing that technology with regards to marketplaces allows you to do, and of course, let's face it, the cost of doing business has risen significantly, whether it's the cost of materials, the cost of people, the cost of logistics. In our business, we've actually retrenched from international markets because we had physical stores there. I'm actually glad we did before the pandemic, but we're now going back out into international markets where we're known with our customers. They've written to us and said, we're devastated, we can't buy you now, but we're going to do it through marketplaces. So you can use technologies to test things before you roll it out as a business model, which if it doesn't work, let's face it, becomes difficult to get out of and very expensive. So that's the other benefit as well. You can be quite agile around testing and then implementation.
And how much have you been using technology to sort of dip a toe in your experiences? I appreciate the last 24 months have been a trial from absolutely every area, and it's forced some test and learn where none was anticipated. But now that sort of baptism of fire has been largely, fingers crossed, overcome. What sort of things are you doing to explore new avenues, whether that's selling more online through marketplaces, using different channels, etc.?
Well, very quickly internally, we're using technology to test customer preferences. So we all talk about, you know, best in class experience, but I think Leanne or Chris mentioned it earlier on, if actually that experience isn't relevant to that customer, it's a complete waste. So we're doing a lot of testing around buy before, you know, before the stock comes in, or testing, you know, when you want newness on the website, do you want it filtered by when it just comes in, or do you want it color merchandised? We're testing going back into abandoned baskets or wish lists, or, you know, all those things internally. But externally, we are just about to go out to market and test either international marketplaces with a well-known platform provider, or actually implementing it ourselves. Now, if we do it ourselves, that'll be quite a big cost investment. So the great thing about being able to test it is you can work out how you best scale those markets in a, you know, in a cost-effective way.
Fantastic. I mean, Chris, in terms of expansion for Ellis Brigham, what sort of priorities are on your plate at the moment?
Well, pre-pandemic, we were looking quite aggressively, and we had aspirations to be in more cities up and down the country. I think where we look at our business now, and we've grown online, and our store sales have returned pretty much kind of outside of a few locations. We'll look for a few areas we'll focus on, so it'll be much more targeted than maybe it was in the past. And we'll look at those particularly around growing our online presence as part of that. So I spoke earlier about the halo effect, and that would be really, really key. And that only might be a handful. We're family run, 85 plus years running. We're not particularly at this point looking to go international, although we'll never say never to anything. But we have a few places lined up, but it'll be much more probably strategic than it was in the past. I think the days of any brand wanting to be on every high street in every town are hopefully long gone. I don't think there's enough consumerism out there for that, and nor possibly should there. We would rather grow in a sustainable way, keep our footprint nice and clean, and connect with those customers in more targeted locations.
Leanne, you're nodding in agreement up there.
Yeah, very much in line with Beth, really. I mean, we're looking at international. We know there's a huge potential for us in the US. Amazingly, not a lot of choice for big cut bras in the US right now. They're about 25 years behind us. So lots of potential, but clearly we don't see ourselves with a huge estate of shops out there. So for us, it's exploring how we create all of the amazing things we were talking about with connection and experience, how we can do that with people, but not physically in shops on the ground. So that's probably our biggest opportunity.
Fantastic. And I mean, Alan, one of the concerns, obviously, that Beth raised, that if you go in physically somewhere, that's a massive cost commitment. Equally, there's concerns, again, retailers with huge legacy systems, they know how much they cost, they know how much has been invested in them, to then grow in whatever direction, whether that's new lines, whether it's new platforms, or indeed new stores or new territories. There is obviously at the front of their mind, oh my God, this is going to be a massive tech cost, and making the right decisions. How has tech evolved in the digitization of retail to be able to say you can dip a toe, you can move, you can be agile, you can move and shift?
I think it's been it's had a huge impact. As Beth said, you know, marketplace is a good strategy. You know, for retailers wanting to test a market with the physical store, we have a number of brands that we work with that use the concept of a pop-up approach. So they maybe take a temporary space for 2, 3, 4 months, trial something out. You know, and then when it comes to terms of, you know, in terms of cost, as a software vendor, that's something that we've worked really hard on doing, helping our customers to be able to easily achieve compliance in certain markets. You know, for example, if you go to Italy or Portugal or Germany, you've got some real challenges around fiscal compliance that you have to meet. But interestingly, what we are also working on is that through our cloud platform, we are able to analyze lots and lots of different data. So yeah, we offer the service where retailers can benchmark themselves against other retailers. So we can say, I want to look at all cosmetics brands who operate in these areas in Paris. We can get an idea of average basket size, footfall, revenue, other KPIs. And that generally is, we're starting to see that our customers are starting to use this as a good measure to say, should I be going to this city? Should I be going to this country? The other thing that we've kind of noticed really is the barriers of entry, although expensive, have reduced though to moving to international markets. But then again, omnichannel has played e-commerce has played a big role in that. That's a really good strategy to start off. But when it comes to physical stores, then you have to consider, earlier, as Chris said, the halo effect. Leanne mentioned that earlier as well. You have a store in the US, and you feel that there's maybe potential scope for more. So you've got to find the right opportunity, the right thing that works for you, I guess.
I think it seems one of those things, isn't it, where there is a bit of a leap of faith, and technology has certainly, and data has certainly helped us shore up those leaps of faith a little bit, but a certain amount of I think bravery is involved, informed bravery. But increasingly we've seen recently, I just want to touch on a container-shaped elephant in the room. As much as we might want to grow, and as we're speaking at the moment, we are slap bang in the middle of Black Friday, for which I also must be very grateful, because you're obviously incredibly busy right now. But obviously we have this collision of Black Friday with, we haven't actually got anything left to sell. Dealing with the volatility, obviously there's been some volatility over the last 24 months as well, but when we want to plan, we want as much data as possible. We can plan going into international markets, but when something like this supply chain issue hits, how able are retailers to mitigate and learn from this going forward? What do we need to be doing in terms of our processes and our management of merchandise and marketing to make sure we aren't as impacted?
I think in the now, it's all about finding alternative choices for customers. You haven't got the thing that you wanted, but there are always other options. And it's about, talking to people about why those options are desirable. So that's what we do, don't we? I think out in the future, none of us know how long it's going to go on for. People are talking about the beginning of 2023. I think we're all building longer into our critical path, or making decisions to fly things in, so that you get things quickly, and weighing up the cost of flying in and having that stock and selling it now versus saving a bit of money on the logistics, but perhaps having paid for it, not having had it. So I think it's an art and science of being really pragmatic about identifying it's going to take longer for a while, so planning it, but then remaining agile so that you are able to change and adapt if you need to.
Fantastic. Leanne and Chris both nodding in great agreement there. I mean, what are your thoughts both?
Well, it's been interesting within our business, because our lead times for our products can be up to 12 months for some of them. So we can't always just find another supplier straight away, and it's impacted all of the markets. But what we have, the good consequence of it has been less product around, increased with high demand as there's a focus on the outdoor consumer, has actually led us to selling more at full price. And our margin has significantly increased, and our need to discount has decreased. So we are looking longer term, going, well, actually, the old theory used to be you want everything in every shop to sort every customer out, and actually we'll look at it in a different way, and we'll probably prioritize our stock into DCs where there'll be less stock holding in the store, and that will actually enable us to sell more at a higher margin, not have to discount less. And it's also hopefully teaching a consumer that buying something that's high quality once or twice is better than buying lots and lots of stuff that has to be mass produced and moved around the world very fast to get there from factories in various areas. And I think certainly we want a sustainable future, and our mantra is about buy good quality and make it last, rather than just buying easy to buy fashion. And I'm sure hopefully Beth and Leanne would probably support that, I would imagine, within their businesses.
Totally, absolutely. It's about beautiful products that last forever. And that's the value for money in the brand proposition, isn't it?
And I think if you're not afraid to sell out of things, and actually it adds value to your brand that you've got high quality product in there, you've sold it and you bought some of it, then we shouldn't necessarily be massively upset, as long as we've got turnover coming through.
Is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
I mean, Leanne, obviously, in terms of in-store, I mean, everyone's in-store people we've realized are very important, but clearly there's a great deal of trust goes on between consumer and in-store person with Bravissimo in terms of being able to communicate that, well, either this isn't right for you, they've come in with a very fixed image of I want that style, that brand.
As Beth said, this is where the expertise comes in, because the team are, a lot of our business does not happen on the shop floor. It happens in the fitting area. It's the team bringing the choice to the customers. And, you know, we do hundreds of styles, and you can't take hundreds of bras into a fitting area, into a customer. You know, you really curate that down. And actually, this is, you know, we've got 94 sizes, we've got a lot of inventory, and this is one of the scenarios where you think, well, actually that's not a bad thing, that our stock is slower moving, and you know, we work on breadth, and it's the team's expertise that comes into bringing it. You know, a customer often does come in with a picture, or, you know, an image of a bra that they've seen. And often, whether that bra is there or not, that might not be what they choose to buy in the end, because it's all about, you know, the experience in the shop and how where that takes them. So yeah, we've just got to, and also on the backdrop of the pandemic, I think we're kind of used to just making different decisions, doing things in a different way, finding a new route. It's kind of, that's the way we're working. Retail's always been quite adaptable, so.
Fantastic. I can't think of a better sort of thing to end our conversation on, the fact that we're used to making different decisions, and we're going to, you know, keep learning how to make different choices. Just before we finish the conversation, I'd just like to go around each of our contributors and just ask, this session was called Revolutionising Retail. And if there's anything you can think of, however big or small, that you feel is about to or has just revolutionized your retail experience, or your experience of the retail sector that you work in, what might that be? And if I can go Leanne, Beth, Chris and Alan, because that's the order you are on my screen.
I think this is for brands that are experience-led, purpose-led, that there's something more to us than product. This is our time. I mean, this is, you know, you talked about retail back in the 1900s. I completely agree. Giving someone a parcel when they, you know, that they've ordered online is not retail. That's just moving stock around. And if we're doing real retail, this is a huge time of opportunity for us. And I think it's just that realization that this is about playing on strengths now.
Fantastic. Beth?
We did a huge piece, a customer survey, and we were very much sort of positioning ourselves as a digital first business, which we still are. But in the survey, the role of store, the role of human beings in the store is absolutely critical. So we are very much building stores in the right locations and that whole experiential bit into our forward strategy. And I think, you know, retail, I think we're all entrepreneurs at heart, aren't we? Because we have to adapt and be one step ahead of the customer. But actually, there's definitely that seamless transition between efficiency of a computer and online and digital experience versus the warm, glowing experience you get at trying a product on, and a style advisor is absolutely critical. So in a way, the research that we did was really reassuring about how important stores are with that whole digital experience.
Fantastic. And Chris?
Really echoing Beth's comments that the people will be the main focus. Our stores going forward will be built more around where we add service, where we add value. So quite often that'll be around fitting or consultation around expeditions or specific journeys people want to go on. Longer term, I think the revolution will come around technology, which enables fit to be aligned with online sales, not taken away from the people, because we never want to do that. But I don't think we are too far away from people's own mobile phones being able to give good fit profiles to link into omnichannel experience. And I think maybe that's 5 to 10 years down the line before that's everywhere, but I think that's definitely coming.
Fantastic. And finally, Alan.
So I've opted to go for a very pragmatic approach because it's a real source of frustration for me. I think I would like to see the adoption of mobile to be to significantly increase in the coming years, whether it be for point of sale, for clienteling, for stock checking, whatever it may be. I think that's a key approach to help you build those warm relationships with your customers. So I'm going to opt for that.
And in actual fact, I was just going to say, there are parts of the world that are doing that already. So when I was in a previous business, Karen Millen, and we had stores in China, 50% of our store sales were done on WeChat. So going back to your point about mobile, I guess from a consumer point of view, there's always that data breach, data privacy bits that we have to get over, and people feeling that they don't want, you know, the big tech companies to own your privacy. That's the thing I think we have to get over. But you're right about the role of the phone.
That's a fantastic note on which to end this video, and there is so much there for me and I hope our audience to learn from. All that remains for me to do is to thank our speakers very much for a fascinating and informative discussion. Thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again next time.